Ma'am, we need to see your documentation. Step away from the vehicle.
I'm a surgeon on my way to the hospital for an emergency procedure. Can this wait?
They said it would only take a minute. Those were the words the federal agent used as he stepped closer, his breath visible in the freezing February air. Doctor, Aisha Williams stood beside her car in surgical scrubs, the morning sun reflecting off snow-covered pavement, her pager vibrating non-stop in her pocket. Somewhere across the city, a 12-year-old boy lay on an operating table, his failing heart waiting for her hands. Every minute mattered. Every second could decide whether he lived or died. Aisha had spent 15 years in operating rooms where time was measured in heartbeats. She had performed more than 3,000 cardiac surgeries, many of them on children whose lives depended on precision and speed. But nothing in her career prepared her for standing in a gas station parking lot, shivering in the cold, while federal agents demanded proof that she belonged in the country where she was born, educated, and had dedicated her life to saving others. The morning was brutally cold despite the clear blue sky. Yesterday's snow still lined the streets of Chicago, glittering under the bright sunlight. Aisha had stopped for gas on her way to the hospital, cutting every possible corner to make it in time for an emergency valve replacement. Her hospital ID hung from her scrub top. Her car was still running. Her pager buzzed again, the operating room asking where she was. Then a black SUV pulled in behind her, blocking her exit. 3 ICE agents stepped out, jackets marked with yellow letters, body cameras already recording. No greeting, no explanation, just a command. Ma'am, we need to see your papers. In that moment, a routine drive to save a child's life became the beginning of a nightmare that would expose how quickly power can be misused, how easily bias can override common sense, and how one decision made in broad daylight would lead to a $9 million verdict that shook a federal agency to its core. Dr. Aisha Williams was not a woman who wasted time. At 41, her life had been shaped by urgency, discipline, and responsibility. She was one of Chicago Memorial Hospital's most respected cardiothoracic surgeons, known for taking pediatric cases other doctors refused, cases where the margin between success and tragedy was razor thin. In 15 years, she had performed more than 3,000 heart surgeries, many on children born with defects so complex they required both technical mastery and absolute calm under pressure. Her training had forged that calm. Medical school at the University of Pennsylvania, surgical residency at Johns Hopkins, where hesitation could cost a life and excuses were not tolerated. She had published research that changed treatment protocols for congenital heart disease and earned a reputation for walking into operating rooms when others walked away. When Aisha Williams was on a case, families knew their child had a fighting chance. That morning was supposed to follow her usual routine: wake before dawn, prepare for surgery, arrive early for rounds. But at 6:45 a.m., her phone rang with an emergency call. 12-year-old Marcus Patterson's condition had suddenly deteriorated. His heart valve was failing, and every hour of delay increased the risk of cardiac arrest. The surgery could not wait. Aisha cut her morning short, pulled on her surgical scrubs at home to save time, clipped her hospital ID to her chest, and headed out into the freezing Chicago morning. She left knowing a child was depending on her, never imagining that before she reached the hospital, her profession, her credentials, and her life's work would be dismissed as meaningless by people who saw only her skin color and nothing else. By the time Dr. $2 daughter, Aisha Williams pulled into the gas station on West Madison Street. The clock was already working against her. It was 8:52 a.m. The surgery was scheduled for 9:30. Under normal conditions, she would have arrived with minutes to spare. But yesterday's snowstorm had turned side streets into sheets of ice, forcing her to drive slower than usual. She told herself this stop would take less than 3 minutes. Enough gas to make it to the hospital and back. Nothing more. She swiped her card, started the pump, and checked her phone. 2 missed calls from the operating room. Another vibration from her pager. The anesthesiologist asking for her estimated time of arrival. The surgical team was assembled. The child was already in pre-op. Aisha typed a quick response, telling them she was minutes away. Unaware that those words were about to become untrue, that was when the black SUV rolled in behind her Subaru, close enough to block the driver's side door. She noticed it out of the corner of her eye and frowned, irritation flickering across her face. Before she could finish pumping gas, 3 figures stepped out, moving with purpose. Boots crunching on frozen pavement. Heavy jackets marked with bright yellow letters. Ice. "Ma'am," one of them said sharply. "Step away from the vehicle." Aisha turned, confused, the cold biting through her scrubs as the winter wind cut across the lot. "I'm on my way to the hospital," she said. "I'm a surgeon. I have an emergency case." The agent didn't ask which hospital. He didn't ask about the patient. Instead, under the clear morning sun, with snow and security cameras capturing every angle, he asked a single question that froze her in place. "Where were you born?" The question hung in the cold air, absurd and jarring in its simplicity. Aisha blinked, momentarily unsure she had heard it correctly. She stood there in burgundy surgical scrubs, her hospital ID clearly visible against her chest, the gas pump still running behind her, and federal agents were asking where she was born. "In Philadelphia," she answered. "I'm an American citizen." Her pager buzzed again, more urgently this time. The operating room was waiting. A child was waiting. Aisha glanced down at the screen and then back at the agents, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I really need to go. A patient is prepped for emergency heart surgery." The lead agent barely reacted. Instead, he nodded to his partners and said they had received a tip. An anonymous call reporting a suspicious woman in medical scrubs near a hospital. Someone who didn't look like she belonged. No name. No evidence. Just suspicion. Treated as fact. "We need proof of your citizenship," he said. "Passport. Birth certificate. Naturalization papers." Aisha felt disbelief harden into anger. "Those are at my home. I have my hospital ID. I can give you my medical license number. You can call Chicago Memorial Hospital right now. Please." The agent glanced at her ID and dismissed it with a shrug. "Those can be faked." In that moment, everything she had worked for, her education, her credentials, her reputation collapsed into irrelevance. Standing in the bright morning light, with witnesses passing by and cameras recording every second, Aisha realized the truth. To them, she wasn't a surgeon on her way to save a child's life. She was a problem to be verified, a suspicion to be resolved. And no amount of urgency or humanity was going to change that. The gas pump clicked off, signaling a full tank. But Aisha Williams didn't move. Her focus was locked on the 3 agents standing in front of her, their posture rigid, their expressions unreadable. The cold wind cut through her scrubs, seeping into her skin. But it was nothing compared to the chill creeping up her spine as she realized they weren't listening. "My driver's license is in the car," she said, gesturing carefully. "My medical license is registered with the state of Illinois. I'm board certified. You can verify all of this in minutes, but I need to get to the hospital now. A child is waiting for surgery. One of the agents stepped closer, closing the distance in a way Aisha immediately recognized as deliberate. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate with our investigation, you will be detained." Detained. The word sounded unreal as it left her mouth. Her pager buzzed again, vibrating insistently. A reminder she couldn't ignore. "I'm not resisting. I'm telling you the truth. Every minute you keep me here puts a child's life at risk. Do you understand that?" The agent's response was flat, procedural, stripped of emotion. "We're enforcing federal immigration law." Aisha looked from one face to another, searching for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of common sense. She found none. The winter sun reflected sharply off the snow-covered pavement, illuminating everything with brutal clarity. There was no confusion here, no misunderstanding. They were choosing paperwork over a human life. Around them, the morning rush continued. Cars pulled in. People glanced over, sensing something was wrong. And in the middle of it all, a heart surgeon stood powerless, watching precious minutes disappear while authority tightened its grip, unmoved by the consequences that were already beginning to unfold. The lead agent's voice hardened. "Turn around. Place your hands on the vehicle." For a moment, "Doctor," Aisha Williams thought she must have misheard. The words didn't fit the reality in front of her. She was a surgeon in scrubs, her hospital ID still visible, her pager buzzing relentlessly with messages from an operating room that needed her now. Yet the agents were no longer asking questions. They were giving orders. "I'm not a threat," Aisha said, her voice shaking from cold and disbelief. "Please, just call the hospital. You can verify everything in minutes." No one moved to make that call. Instead, one agent stepped behind her while another positioned himself to her side. A practiced formation that left no doubt about what was happening. Bystanders began to slow, some stopping entirely. A man at a nearby pump stared openly. A woman reached for her phone. The bright winter sun made every detail impossible to miss. Aisha turned slowly and placed her gloved hands on the hood of her Subaru. The metal was ice cold, even through the fabric. Her breath came out in quick clouds as her body tensed. Adrenaline surging. Behind her, she heard the unmistakable click of metal. The handcuffs snapped shut around her wrists, shockingly cold, biting into her skin. At that same moment, her pager slipped from her pocket and dropped into the snow, still vibrating, its screen flashing urgent messages from the hospital. "Where are you? Patient's vitals declining." Aisha swallowed hard. "I'm a doctor," she said again, her voice breaking. "I'm trying to save a child's life." But the agents had already made their choice. In broad daylight, under clear skies and rolling cameras, a pediatric heart surgeon was placed in handcuffs while the minutes that mattered most continued to slip away. Ice-guided doctor. Aisha Williams away from her car as the crowd around the gas station grew. Voices rose in protest. Someone shouted that she was a doctor. Another person demanded the agents let her go. Several phones were now pointed directly at the scene, recording everything in the sharp morning light. But the agents didn't slow down. They didn't explain. They walked her toward their SUV as if none of it mattered. Inside the vehicle, Aisha was placed in the back seat, her hands cuffed behind her, a metal barrier separating her from the front. The heater blasted warm air, but her body continued to shake uncontrollably, a mix of cold, shock, and helpless rage. Through the window, she could still see her Subaru at the pump, engine running, gas cap hanging loose. Her medical bag visible on the passenger seat. Everything about her life had been left behind in that parking lot. As the SUV pulled out into morning traffic, Aisha closed her eyes and forced herself to breathe. Her mind went to the operating room. To Marcus Patterson. She pictured his small chest rising and falling. The monitors. The delicate anatomy she had studied and memorized. She wondered who the hospital would call to replace her. Whether they would understand his unique condition. Whether the delay would push his heart past the point of recovery. Across the city, alarms sounded in the operating room. The surgical team waited, then made the call to bring in another surgeon. Minutes turned into a dangerous stretch of time, and while Chicago's streets crawled with rush-hour traffic, a decision made at a gas station began to ripple outward, placing a child's life in jeopardy and setting consequences in motion that could never be undone. The drive to the detention facility took 45 minutes, slowed by morning traffic and streets still slick with ice. Every second felt stolen. When they arrived, Dr. Aisha Williams was escorted inside and processed like any other detainee. Fingerprints were taken, hands that had repaired failing hearts now pressed onto a scanner. A photograph followed. A mugshot of a surgeon still wearing hospital scrubs. Her ID badge clipped to her chest like an accusation no one bothered to read. Her phone was taken. Her wallet. The pager that had been screaming for her attention was logged as personal property and set aside. "I need to make a call," Aisha said, her voice hoarse. "I have a patient in surgery." "I have that right. You'll get a call after verification," she was told. After verification. The phrase echoed in her mind as an agent finally sat at a computer and entered her information. Name. Date of birth. Social Security number. It took less than 2 minutes. The screen confirmed everything she had said from the beginning. U.S. Citizen by birth. Born in Pennsylvania. Medical license, active and in good standing. No criminal history. No immigration issues. Hospital privileges verified at Chicago Memorial. Silence filled the room. One agent leaned back slightly, his expression changing from certainty to discomfort. Another stared at the screen, jaw tight. They had detained a pediatric heart surgeon on her way to an emergency operation based on nothing more than a baseless tip and their own assumptions. At unsprezecha shaptisprezecha. M. More than 2 hours after she'd been stopped for gas. Aisha's handcuffs were removed. "There appears to have been an error," she was told flatly. "You're free to go." Aisha didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply said, "I told you exactly who I was, and you chose not to listen." The moment Dr. Sprechen, Aisha Williams stepped outside, her hands shaking as she was given back her phone. She dialed the hospital. She didn't wait to steady her breath. She didn't look back at the building. The call connected on the first ring. "Aisha." "Where are you, doctor?" Patterson's voice was tight, controlled in the way surgeons speak when something has already gone wrong. "What's happening with Marcus?" she asked. Cutting him off, there was a pause on the line. "Just long enough to feel heavy. He crashed about 40 minutes ago. We got him back. But it was close. Too close. We had to bring in Davidson to do the valve replacement." Aisha closed her eyes. The words hit harder than the handcuffs ever had. 40 minutes. That was the gap. That was the cost of the decision made at a gas station. "I was detained by ICE," she said quietly. "They stopped me on the way to work." Silence followed. Then anger. Low and restrained. They did what? The hospital sent a car to pick her up. When Aisha arrived at Chicago Memorial just before 1 p.m., she had been awake for hours. detained for more than 2 of them, and drained in a way she had never felt before. She changed out of her damp scrubs and went straight to the cardiac ICU. Marcus Patterson lay in the bed, pale but alive, machines humming softly around him. His parents stood as she entered, relief mixed with confusion on their faces. "They told us you couldn't make it," his mother said. "We were so scared." Aisha swallowed, her composure finally breaking. "I tried," she said, her voice cracking. "I was stopped. I'm so sorry." What happened at that gas station did not stay there. In the days that followed, Dr. Aisha Williams replayed every moment in her mind, the questions, the disbelief, the cold metal of the handcuffs, the knowledge that a child had nearly died while she sat powerless in the back of a government vehicle. And the more she thought about it, the clearer one truth became. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a violation. Within a week, Aisha retained a civil rights attorney with experience confronting federal overreach. Together, they filed a lawsuit against Immigration and Customs Enforcement and the agents involved, alleging false imprisonment, racial profiling, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and interference with emergency medical care. The complaint was not subtle. It laid out, in precise detail, how federal authority had been exercised without probable cause and without regard for human life. The evidence quickly became overwhelming. Security footage from the gas station showed Aisha clearly identified as medical personnel, standing in scrubs with her hospital badge visible. Body camera footage captured her repeatedly explaining the emergency, offering multiple ways to verify her identity, begging the agents to call the hospital. Phone records showed dozens of unanswered calls from Chicago Memorial during her detention. Hospital documentation confirmed the delay in Marcus Patterson's surgery and the cardiac arrest that followed. Most damning of all was the so-called tip that started everything. Under legal discovery, ICE was forced to produce it. An anonymous caller. No credentials. No proof. Just a claim that a black woman in medical scrubs looked suspicious. And on that alone, federal agents had chosen to act. 16 months after the detention, the case went to trial in federal court. The courtroom was packed every day. Doctors in white coats sat beside nurses, medical students, and civil rights advocates. They weren't there out of curiosity. They were there because they understood exactly what was at stake when a surgeon could be pulled off the street based on nothing more than how she looked. Dr. Aisha Williams testified for 2 full days. She spoke calmly at first, walking the jury through her education, her career, the thousands of lives she had helped save. Then she described the morning of the detention, the cold, the sunlight, the pager buzzing in her pocket while she was being questioned, then handcuffed. She described standing there knowing a child was waiting for her, knowing every minute mattered, and realizing the agents did not care. Marcus Patterson's parents took the stand next. They described watching their son's heart stop while doctors rushed to bring him back. Hospital administrators testified about the complications caused by the delay. Constitutional law experts explained how the stop violated basic Fourth Amendment protections. Medical ethicists testified that interfering with emergency care endangered not just one patient, but public safety itself. The defense argued the agents had followed procedure, that they acted in good faith. But the body camera footage told a different story. It showed warnings ignored, proof dismissed, and a surgeon treated as a suspect long after any reasonable doubt had been erased. After 7 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict: liable on all counts. The damages were severe, a total of now $9 million, reflecting not just what had been done to Dr. Turn, Williams, but the life that had nearly been lost because of it. Dr. Aisha Williams did not react when the verdict was read. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She sat still as the number echoed through the courtroom, knowing that no amount of money could give back the hours she lost. The fear Marcus Patterson endured, or the moment she realized her profession meant nothing in the face of unchecked power. In the weeks that followed, the consequences spread quickly. All 3 ICE agents involved were terminated. Internal reviews were launched. New policies were announced, including restrictions on detaining healthcare workers, wearing medical identification, and requirements for supervisory approval before acting on anonymous tips. Changes that came too late for the child whose heart had nearly stopped, but necessary to prevent it from happening again. Aisha returned to Chicago Memorial Hospital and to the operating room where she belonged. She continued performing surgery, saving lives. But the experience changed her. She now carried multiple forms of identification. She kept the hospital's legal team on speed dial, not because she had done anything wrong, but because she understood how fragile her rights could be. She used part of the settlement to establish a legal defense fund for healthcare workers facing discrimination and to support medical education in underserved communities. Her story became required viewing in civil rights training and medical ethics programs, a stark reminder of what happens when bias overrides common sense. Dr. Aisha Williams still saves lives, but she will never forget the February morning when she stood in the snow, in surgical scrubs, under a bright winter sun, and learned that in some situations, the cost of prejudice isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in heartbeats, especially the heartbeats of children waiting for doctors who are never allowed to arrive on time.